Thank you. So we heard yesterday about the hero's journey, and I guess you would say today we're hearing about the heroine's journey. Although I don't use that word because I think hero is a great word for men and women. Um, and a lot of this has been inspired by talks I've had with Joe over the last couple of years about the hero's journey. So I have a project. Joe always says, talk about what's going on right now in your life. So what's going on right now in my life is that I have a project that's been in the works that is going to launch in 2.5 weeks. And it was inspired by 3 points in time. The first point in time was 2015 when my first book was published, and it was a book for women, nonfiction. All of my books are nonfiction. A book for women to help them navigate their organizations well. And so that was the first point in time, and that was 10 years ago, which is remarkable to me. The second point in time was June of 2022 when Roe versus Wade was overturned. And the third point in time was January of this year when a misogynistic and probably sociopathic president was elected. So what I wanted to do is honor women. And so last year, worried that we might be in the situation we're in, about a year ago, I started thinking about, gosh, 10 years. How can I honor women 10 year in 2025? And I thought about all these women that I'd met over the years. I've traveled over 50 cities with my books and speaking. And so I reached out to many of them and I asked them to tell me about a brave moment in their lives. And those became stories that are in this book that I'm launching in 2.5 weeks called Brilliantly Brave: Women's Stories of Grit and Grace. And it's going to be available as of March 1st because that's the first day of Women's History Month, which goes on through the whole month of March. And I am being very brave in doing this too, because I'm doing something completely different with this book. My last 3 books have been hardbound traditional books. This will be 100% online on a platform I've never worked with before, but I'm getting there with the help of a friend and young colleague named Elisa. And she's never worked on it either, but when COVID hit, I noticed that Mitch Albom had a book. Some of you may have read Tuesdays with Morrie or anything else by him. He had a book on this platform called Substack, and it was a full book. And while I have a newsletter, you can't offer a book on a newsletter. So anyway, it's going to be available for free for anyone who wants it, starting March 1st. So what is it? Um, it's 20 stories that of women's moments when they were brave, and there are a few of my stories as well. Um, the 6 parts of the book are career courage, Mona Lisa courage, highly inspired by Joe, broken-hearted courage, courageous confrontations, conquering self-reliance, and the last part is knowing your worth and staying true to you, which is really courageous. So I thought I would just mention, a story or two. I'm not going to read these stories, but just mention a story or two in each of these parts so you get a sense of what I've gathered here and compiled. So in Career Courage, you're going to meet a woman named Pina who at 40, the name of her story is A Secret and a New Beginning. So at 40, she thought to herself, you know what? I've been in this career of merchandising and fashion, and I don't want to do this. What I really want to do and what I've always wanted to do is to be a therapist. So she doesn't tell her family. She signs up for a class. Sure, she's going to drop it the next day. And the brave moment of walking into a classroom, you're 40, everyone around you is 18 or 20. But she sticks with it. And today she has a lovely, thriving practice as a therapist. So how brave is that? Um, I thought I would read my story in Career Courage. I thought I would read the part that has to do with Joe. So my story is, I'm on top of the world. I had this amazing job. I could never have imagined having a job like this and all these people, and there's just something missing. And so I quit. And the and I'd been there, quite a while. So I'm going to read you just a little bit of my conversation with Joe after I quit. Later, I asked my spiritual director, Joe, about this seeming madness. Joe, I said, I still don't understand why I left the job. It felt like some part of me was missing, like my center of gravity. Now, this is Joe, he says to me. The work was too small for you. And I say back, pardon? I was chief operating officer of a billion-dollar company. And Joe says, the work was a role. A role is not who you are. It's not who anyone is. You were starting to wonder if you could be more than that role. But you had no map, so you felt lost. You were actually creating your own map. It's heroic, really, what you did. He continues, anytime you're willing to break through to new ground, that's heroic, a hero's journey. It's everyone's journey if you're willing to be called to it. It's the same as the soul's journey. Our souls are unknown territory, especially in this culture. That was the force moving you to your next place. The wisdom of Joe. Okay, then in Mona Lisa Courage, which is inspired by Joe and Mona Lisa, and how he talks about how she's home sweet home in her own skin, not assigned to any certain role. You're going to meet Kelly, who is 48 today. And Kelly, as a child, grew up with a Southern Belle mom who, as she described it, always wanted her to be in pretty little dresses, except all Kelly wanted to do is be on the playground and fight with the boys. And, she grew up and her mom wanted her to have a gentle career, maybe it's nursing or teaching or something. And she entered construction. But her really brave thing is, and her story is called Defying Roles, is that she said, the role of being a mother is not for me. And she married at 38. She has two beautiful stepchildren. Her husband was fine with her not having kids. But how brave is that? To push back against our culture, which says if you're female, you have to be a mom. So that's very cool. The third part is Broken Hearted Courage. And I kick off this part, Jill, who we all know and adore here, was kind enough to write a story about a moment when she needed to have reserves of courage. And I asked Jill if she would read her story, and she's going to read it right now.
Hey everybody, this is me. I had a feeling I would have some emotions as I got ready to read my story to you all. I practiced and it was fine, but we'll see. And because you've heard little bits of the stories in this book, you can imagine how excited and honored I've been to read mine. I hope you can still see me because I have just pulled my story up and I can't see any of you, but maybe that's good.
We can see you.
Great. My story is called Impossible Circumstances. One terrible step at a time. That's how I learned that I'm brave. At 37, I became the first-time mother of a baby son whom my husband and I named Russ after his paternal grandfather. 10 nights later, as we climbed into bed exhausted, my husband turned to me and said, "Wake me if you need anything. Promise?" I promised, not knowing those would be the last words I'd hear from his lips. Anyone who has parented an infant knows how one tiny human can upend an entire life. Others may know the disorienting rug pulled out from under you feeling of losing a life partner in one sudden instant. I happen to know both. Birth and death both visited me. And within the space of 10 days, I became a mother and a widow. Groundless. There's a scene in the movie Gravity where George Clooney's character floats off into space. That was how I felt, tumbling, groundless, adrift in the infinite black unknown. After my husband died, I was afraid of everything. Afraid of the dark, of being alone, of leaving my house and staying in it. I was shocked and offended by every sunrise because my world had stopped turning, and it was an affront seeing life carrying on. I felt jealous of people driving down the road in my neighborhood, imagining them on their way to work or the grocery store, and wishing I could trade my nightmare for their mundane, everyday existence. I thought about escape. I knew that no one would think badly of me if I took medicine that would make me sleep all day. If I took too much of it, maybe I could end things entirely. But I was unwilling to abdicate responsibility for my child, and my son had already lost one parent. He wouldn't lose me too. The only way out was to go through it, one terrible step at a time. People came to my house and sat with me, preparing meals, folding laundry, and sweeping up the endless dirt tracked in by visitors. They showed up in the worst, most uncomfortable kind of circumstances. Their presence was a gift of love. Even in the fog of my naked, raw grief, I could see and feel that. One galvanizing moment. Then there came a moment when I decided to show up for myself. It was early in my grief journey. I'd lost everything, and I was, quite frankly, pissed about it. I swore to myself and to God, the universe, a higher power, whoever was listening, that since I was handed this crappy life, I would live every awful minute to the fullest. My anger propelled me forward. I'd been living in paralyzing fear, which would have kept me frozen if not for my anger. As I came back to life, anger was a friend. And it turned out that every minute wasn't awful. In fact, by opening to the full spectrum of life, I found that by feeling such deep despair, I could, with time, more fully experience joy. The clarity of hindsight reveals what I couldn't see back then. To show up brokenhearted and scared is brave as hell.
Ah, thank you for that. Our wounded warrior. That's what I think of when I think of you, Jill. A wounded warrior. In fact, I think we need to change the title of your story. So I'll talk to you about that later. Um, okay, so part 5, conquering self-reliance. You will meet a woman named Stephanie, who's 42. Stephanie, in college, knew she had some sort of a learning disorder. And so she got tested and she found out she had ADHD. She felt great shame learning that. So her whole life she compensated. Never dealt with it. By the way, the name of her story is Asking for Help When No One Knew I Needed It. And I think, as women, we are so incredibly self-reliant, but sometimes we need to ask for help. And so anyway, her story is that she made journalism her career, but she, switched around quite a lot, as she says, part of ADHD, different jobs, different. She just recently, actually, this is how I met her. She's published a magazine for artists, which is a beautiful magazine. And actually, Deb Ackerman, I need to talk to you about that another time. And anyway, a couple of years ago, she's looking around her house and she sees all this chaos and all this clutter. And she has kids, and they didn't do it. She did it. And so she finally says to herself, I have to ask for help here. I can't live like this anymore. And so she goes to her doctor and she gets medicine, and her life has changed now because she was finally willing to ask for help. We can be brave, we can be warriors, but having people around us makes a huge difference. And then the last part, knowing your worth and staying true to you. Now that's really courageous. I thought I would end actually reading my story, which is really quite lighthearted, and it involves Joe. So I thought I would read it to you. It's called A Google Visit. When my second book, Fully Human, was published, I was invited by Google to speak to their New York employees. I was so excited that I packed, unpacked, and repacked the clothes I wanted to take on the trip. Once there, I learned that there were 2 of us speaking to the Googlers. The presenter before me was maybe 30, unlike me, let's say, and she had created a very cool product, a jump rope being used in lesser developed countries that doubled as solar light. The kids could use it for playtime, and it could also be a source of light in homes. Then she lit it up, and in 4-inch heels, she began jumping rope on stage to, show us its full effect. My stomach sank. My flat, lifeless segment was next. It was a fireside chat where a moderator asks you boring questions about your work and life. The auditorium was set up as theater in the round with employees around in every direction. The lights were low, so it was hard to make out people's facial expressions as the questions began. But I figured if there was such a thing as a collective eye roll, it was happening right now toward me. I began answering the questions, and all the while I wanted to scream, I know you don't care about these stupid questions. I know you want the rope jumper back. But then it got interesting. The moderator surprised me by asking about a passage in Fully Human where I wrote about my spiritual director, Joe, and how he would say, don't forget to charge your soul phone every morning, Susan. What does that mean? she asked. With trepidation, I muttered, "It's code for meditate and pray." Slowly, people began looking up from their phones. Questions began from all parts of the room. How do you meditate? What method do you use? How do you find a spiritual director? They were engaged. Turns out I wasn't boring after all. I offered value in my own unexpected way. We each have unique gifts that offer value to others. That day, when I stopped trying to be the rope jumper, I could proudly show up as myself. So, just in summary about this book, we women are heroes, given all that we do for this world, but we don't see ourselves that way. And we should. And that's the purpose of this book. So I'd like to close. Jill, if you could put up the picture of my young friend Riley. It's okay if you can't find
I'm
her.
having trouble finding her, but she's here. So hold on just one second.
Okay. Oh, there she is. So this is my young friend Riley, who lives across the road from me. And she's just, every time I get out of the car, she runs across the road and gives me a big hug. And anyway, her mom dresses her this way with t-shirts that say, "Be strong, be brave." And I think as moms and dads and aunts and uncles and grandpas and grandmas, that we need to remind our girls they are strong, they are brave, and then they'll grow up to be. And maybe they will see a female president of this country who will take much of the darkness of the world away.